Greetings, one and all, to Toronto, Canada, and episode 273 of the Brain Software Podcast, where we give you the keys to a better life. Whether you're a hypnotist or you're interested in personal development, NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, or just being all around awesome, we are here for you. I'm Chris Thompson. I'm the guy with the soothing voice. And Mike Mandel and I are raring to get started, so stay tuned for the kind of information that sharpens your mind and ups your game. Here's what we've got for you today. First, we're going to talk about Tony Robbins, Mike. He was recently on a podcast called the PBD podcast. It's an awesome podcast. And we got some great takeaways from the conversation that he had with Patrick on that podcast. Next, we're going to talk about mass hypnosis, hypnosis and the media. And we're going to use a really good real-life example of a grade 9 high school teacher from Vancouver, British Columbia, and talk about Elon Musk and Tesla and how it all fits together. And I think it's a really cool discussion. We're also going to end with two awesome things, a little bit shorter. We're going to show you a cool way to stop discussions from going off the rails, and it doesn't take any longer than 5 seconds to do.
Absolutely.
It's tested, it's proven, and it works. Mike brought it up to me. We love it. It's fantastic. And finally, we're going to teach you a great linguistic technique that will help people be more receptive to criticism. And the good news is it takes an entire letter away from everything that you do. I mean, no, seriously, it takes no time at all to do this. It's super easy.
What do you mean takes a letter away from?
Think of the word switch that we're making.
Oh.
Hint, one is a 3-letter word and it becomes a 2-letter word.
Got it.
Right? Anyway, that was a weird way of hooking you to listen, but you're going to keep listening anyway, because here's your disclaimer.
Disclaimer. There are many disclaimers out there, and this is one of them. In this podcast, we won't be going all woo-woo and remotely muscle testing you for introjects because we already have. You heard me. And here's the important question. Can you really stop us? Can you stop us at all? Bavarch!
Yeah, how are you tonight? Thanks once again. And I'm making my $20 they're giving me. I have to ask you a stupid question, so here goes nothing from Meaford, which is typical. Whatever happened to that old tranquility we used to experience before Duder moved in with Eddard?
These are days of victory. So let's welcome a man who's been bending minds longer than Keith Richards has been bending guitar strings. He's a hypnotic rock star, a master of the trance riff, and someone who proves you can still be cool while talking about the unconscious mind. You heard me. He's probably got more stories than a Rolling Stones tour bus.
I do.
And they're all about hypnosis. So please welcome the Keith Richards of hypnosis, Mike Mandel.
Yes, Christopher, and let's rock it.
That was a fun intro. All right, we're going to do a little bit of promo and banter and get right into our think tank words and our main content. So here's what we've got for you. First of all, I want to mention that in November, we started our Pythos Mastermind, Pykhtos, if you want to know how to spell that, made up Greek word, which is the name of our company, our sister company to Mike Mandel Hypnosis. That's where we help all kinds of people helpers, hypnotists, NLP practitioners, coaches, etc., build their business. We launched a mastermind in November, and we are now just wrapping up our 6-week module where Timothy and I have been teaching the entire growth system to our customers. It's really fun. It's all recorded. We'd be happy to have you join the Pythos Mastermind. You can just head on over to pythos.com. If you do join it, all of the training, of course, has been recorded, and we're doing ongoing weekly coaching calls. You get included access to our digital platform, the entire process that you can use to run your business, all the software, everything that you want to do, from websites to courses to calendars and booking systems and payment links and orders, all that stuff. If you want to learn how to do business stuff, come to Pythos.
And who is this appropriate for?
It's appropriate really for anybody who runs a business where you help other people. So you could be a solopreneur doing hypnosis or NLP coaching. You could be running a karate studio. You could be teaching guitar lessons. If you help people, we can help you.
Awesome.
All right. Next up, we've got the Architecture of Hypnosis. Mike, talk about why people come on out to the Architecture of Hypnosis in Toronto and what it is.
People find it to be a life-changing experience. I'm not exaggerating. 5 days with me and Chris and our resource people from all over the place. It is astonishing. We have former students like Catherine comes all the way from the Isle of Man in the Irish Sea.
Coming
This will
for
be
her
her
sixth time
in 3 years because people get so much out of the community, meeting with each other. They experience transformation when they're there, and they're thrown in the deep end and have an absolute blast learning how to be an incredible hypnotist.
You know what's interesting too is how many people come more than once. A lot. Who pays for a 1 week long course and then pays for it all over again? That's what happens in our class. So even if you only come once, which is all we're asking, you will freaking love it. So check it out at MikeMandelHypnosis.com/class, or you can just go to the events tab on our website, the navigation menu. And then finally, I want to mention that we've got our new community. This is a really low cost community. It's called the Brain Software Syndicate because, as I get you, Mike, to come into frame a little bit more here, the Brain Software Syndicate is an extension of the Brain Software Podcast. So if you like the stuff that we talk about on this podcast, we have so much in the syndicate. Plus, it's a community. It's an interactive community of like-minded people, very, very low cost. And you've got $670 worth of our training programs included in it. It's literally just a few bucks a month.
We're insane.
So it's crazy. So check that out at MikeMandelHypnosis.com/BSS, which stands for Brain Software Syndicate. BS with an extra S. You'll love it. I really like that.
Clever.
I'm going to use that from now. Okay, let's get on to our think tank words.
All right.
Dracularize them, and then we talk about the main content.
All right, so I have spun the words out of Savo Bogacek's actual think tank again, and these are the ones that came up. Standby, forepaw, and blinker.
Okay, Stand By. I think Stand By Me, Benny King, and I think the movie Stand By Me, and I think about stories of youth.
Oh, it's interesting. I think of a guy called Styles Q, who used to be in Newmarket, and they used to book me at a place called Spotlight or something when I do hypnosis shows. And Styles was funny. You'd be on the phone to him, and he'd just suddenly say, "Stand by." Put it on mute. On mute. It's just stand by. So I like it. Stand by. To me, that means waiting for something to happen. Stand by. I'm still talking.
Yeah.
To me, just stand by. Put them on mute. That's interesting because stand by means you're going to wait because you're anticipating something happening. Yeah. That's what I'm getting. How does that fit with any of this, though?
Well, you're waiting to see where we go next with the actual content. So stand by.
There is that.
Stand by.
Now, what about forepaw?
Forepaw.
Not faux paw. Not fox paw.
Forepaw. I just thought the horrible. I won't even say it. I have no idea what the heck does forepaw even mean.
Well, I can tell you. Like in the case of a cat,
just for the audience.
FOREPAW. So we have Foxtrot, Oscar, Romeo, Echo, Penis, Alpha, Whiskey. So when you do this, I do that all the time. When I have to spell something, the only one that's abnormal is penis. All the others are complete, the phonetic thing that pilots use. I think it's hilarious.
Alpha, Bravo.
Yeah.
What's this?
Charlie, Delta, Echo, Fox.
Okay, and when you get to P, you say penis.
Yeah, and you do it,
which
totally
is hilarious.
It is. Now, interestingly, a cat like my cat Kwai here, he's got paws.
Yeah,
the ones that would be hands are the forepaws.
Forepaws. Yes. Oh, so they're like cats or dog
cat hands. Yeah.
Oh, does it apply to dogs too?
I would think so.
Okay.
Especially the Wonder Dog Ollie.
Forepaws and hind paws. Okay, got you.
Okay.
What does that mean?
So, I think of a cat's paw right away, and a cat's paw is a metaphor. You know, he's using so-and-so as his cat's paw. Like a cat's paw is someone else you use to pull like a coal out of a fire or something. They take the risk so you don't have to do it.
Okay, got you. All right.
What about blinker? Right away, I think of blinking in the blinkery, like Jack the freaking
your
blinker.
Stories about your dad, and when the blinker wouldn't work, and he would tell it. This is so.
My dad, the turn signal in his 66 Delta Olds 88 whatever with enormous engine. He had a heavy hand and he wrecked the turn signal. So when he let go of it, it was dealing with the horn inside the steering column. He let go, it would go, and he'd have to lift it. So he's like, So my mum said, get the bloody car fixed, Ken. Take it to Goldmouse. No, I'll do it myself. Royal Engineers. Some people have a man in to do this. He got a shoelace and tied it around the blinker and then around the knob of the radio. So now the radio wasn't usable. The turn signal was not usable. He was eccentric as hell. He went to Canadian Tire, which is a automotive store.
Hardware store.
Bought a pair of, but mostly automotive. He bought a pair of work gloves and a can of yellow paint, sprayed the left hand one yellow, and did frickin' hand signals out the window of our car.
Just stop trying to blind me.
Just terrible. I'm we're picking up my girlfriend. She didn't have my driver's license yet. Was in driver's ed. And my dad's putting on the frickin' yellow glove and horrible.
Wonder why
Why
that
did you remind me of
relationship
that?
never
That's
worked
access.
out.
That's access to trance. I'll tell you.
Oh, that's
God
so
bless him.
So yeah, if you have not yet listened to episode 272, which we published a couple of weeks ago about everyday trances in the trance, I still have it on my desk here from when we last recorded because it's the same day we are doing.
Yeah, that's why I'm wearing the same
in case
stuff.
you're
I
wondering
admit it,
why
so it's
Mike's
okay.
still dressed the same.
Yeah, it's cold down here.
By the way, I found out that YouTube is actually the world's biggest podcast platform, even though all major podcasters publish the audio version like we do, and most of you are probably listening to the audio version. But interestingly enough, YouTube, everyone who publishes video publishes there, and it's a way bigger platform.
Yeah, it's interesting.
So
And
there you go.
contained within YouTube is not only the podcast, but U2, your favorite band.
Too. There you go. Yeah.
All right.
Oh, I used to say I would get so annoyed if I was speaking to Siri or Alexa, and I have to call. In case you ever hear me saying this, when I don't want them to listen to me and act on my commands, I call them Esri and Aliha.
So they don't jump in.
Yeah, so they don't jump in and interrupt me, right? So when I'm speaking to Esri or Aliha and I say, play U2, Where the Streets Have No Name, and the response will be, I'm sorry, I don't have access to YouTube on this platform or something. I said YouTube. All right.
That might qualify as oversharing.
Yeah, and I would go into an anger trance. Like in episode 272, which is the entire point of that little tangent.
I don't have Alexa, so I don't have to use that one. I just have to stick with the Esme one for.
Esri. Esri.
All right. So,
okay,
main content talking points begin.
All right. First of
we
all,
didn't Dracularize it.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Okay, stand by. Okay, if you're waiting for Dracula to come out of his grave and you got the stake ready, or for him to come back and get in the coffin so you can put a stake through his heart.
Standing by for a vampire.
Yeah.
Dracula.
That kind of works.
All right.
What about forepaw?
Forepaw. Cat scratch, blood, Dracula.
Okay, that's good. I was going forepaw to cat to werecat to werewolf to vampire to Dracula. Too many steps. Okay, what about blinker?
Blinker to flashing lights to emergency to car crash to death to Dracula.
Oh, brilliant. Okay, I'm giving you a 10 out of 10.
That was great.
It was the speed you went through.
Yeah, that was
brilliant.
just boom. I saw it in my mind. All
Nice.
right. Talking points. Here's what we got for you. Let's start.
What do we got?
Let's talk about Tony Robbins.
Okay.
Because first of all, Tony Robbins, the reason we're bringing this up right now is he was on a podcast called I always mix this up, but PBD. Awesome guy named Patrick Bet David. Anyway, he has an awesome podcast that I really enjoy, and I was listening to it, and he interviewed Tony Robbins for about 2 hours. And doing like these weird Italian gestures. I don't know why, but okay.
La forza del destino.
It was a really good interview. I've listened to Tony Robbins ever since I heard about him through you back in 1993.
Yeah.
Because when you did the brain software keynote at Carleton University in 93 in Porter Hall, which started to change my life in major ways.
Now we're doing this.
Which has led to this, which is really freaking cool, guys. So if you think about the chain that will lead to your future, little things like this right now could change your life. Tony Robbins has some great stuff, and you got me to buy his book, Unlimited Power, and then Awaken the Giant Within. And, I had a job when I was in the telecom industry where the manager team, they liked Tony Robbins' material. So we had what was the cassette tape called? The Personal Power. The 30-day Personal Power, which I dubbed them all on high-speed dubbing on it so I could have my own copy of them. Yes, I pirated Tony Robbins' material in my 20s. I apologize.
Don't go admitting too much.
I may have.
Pornhub will be next.
It was fantastic stuff, Tony Robbins, and I just really loved it. So, of course, when I noticed that he's been interviewed on a podcast with a guest as a guest by a host that I like, I thought it'd be cool. And so let's start out with the following. He told a story. I think Patrick asked him, how did you get involved in this stuff? Like, what were some of the transformational moments in your life? I think you'll like this. He talked about how when he grew up, they were quite poor. And I guess a neighbor or somebody anonymous who lived near them knew that the holidays were coming up and this family didn't have any money and probably couldn't feed themselves a nice holiday dinner. So a delivery man showed up at their door one day in their apartment, knocked, and Tony Robbins' father answers the door, and the man's holding 2 bags of groceries, and he's got a frozen turkey. And he says, this is for you. And Tony Robbins' father got like irate, mad. He was trying to close the door. But this man who is the delivery, hey, look, I don't shoot the messenger. I'm just the delivery guy, because the door kind of bounced off the man's shoulder by accident because the guy was lighting the doorway.
I don't know this story.
It bounced off his shoe. And the guy said to Tony's father, like, look, don't let your ego get in the way of your family's holidays. This is just a kind gesture from somebody who knows you're going through a hard time. So his father ended up taking the food and the groceries, slams the door, never thanked the man or anything. It's put him down. And I guess they probably ate the food and stuff. But here's what happened. Shortly thereafter, Tony Robbins' father left the family, basically abandoned his family. And so this got into a really good discussion about focus, meaning, and action. So I know you haven't listened to this podcast.
No, I haven't.
But guys, I told Mike that this is something I'm going to just drive this conversation and then have Mike react.
Yeah. And comment.
I knew this would fit in so well with the NLP stuff. Mm-hmm. So here's what Tony basically said. His dad was focused. Anything that happens to you, right? You start, or something that has happened, you focus. You focus on what's going on. So imagine this unusual, knock, knock, knock.
Here's a turkey, sir.
So it's not expected. You're focused on it. Now you have to assign meaning to it. And once you assign meaning to it, then you take your next steps, or the action, let's call it, right?
Okay.
So here's what Tony explained. He said, my dad acted as if the meaning of this, so I'm focused on the situation, the meaning I assign to it as the father here is, I am worthless. I can't support my family.
Oh, man, that's terrible.
And so what is the next action? He abandons them, right?
Oh.
Now, in his case, he said the meaning was totally different. In Tony's case, he's the little boy there. And he took the meaning from it that strangers can be deeply caring and can help others. And that shaped his destiny and basically empowered him to think, man, I want to go out and help people like that guy did, or the stranger the delivery person, obviously, it was an anonymous gift. Whoever was giving that anonymous gift. And they got onto this because I guess Tony Robbins' companies, he helps thousands, millions, lots and lots and lots of people. I think he talked about raising money to feed billions of people.
Good grief.
A meal, not on perpetuity basis, but
right.
He spends, for a long time, he's been spending a lot of money and raising money from other philanthropic people to feed hungry families at holidays and stuff like that. So that's where this came from. But what do you get from that in terms of just the idea of focusing on something, the meaning you assign to it, and then the action that you take next?
Well, I find it interesting because to me, the hinge is the meaning. Yes. Everything depends on that.
Exactly.
Our focus is going to happen anyway.
All the time.
We're always focusing on something. And the action is dependent on the meaning. So the meaning seems to really be the central part, the hinge of this.
Kind of fits in with this book that we talked about last episode, doesn't it, right? So Trance as People Live, that was the subject of episode 272. So what trance might somebody go into when they assign meaning, and then the action is based upon the trance that they're living at that moment, isn't it?
You can see it could go in multiple ways. It can be what really happened in the sense of, this charity is wrong for me. I'm not worthy. Or it can be, oh, what a wonderful world it is that somebody would do this. I should be helping people too. The meaning is really going to be determining every action, isn't it?
Yeah. And it also makes me think of how often have we been in situations where somebody wanted to do something for us? Maybe it's somebody who had less means than us, though. Even they want to give us a gift, but we feel bad that, well, I know I'm well off. I don't want to take your money or this thing that cost you money. I want to say no to you to protect you. But in reality, they're doing this thing because it's a nice gesture, and we should just accept it and allow them the pleasure of feeling good about giving.
Absolutely, we should. We deny them, the better to give than to receive. And I found that to be the case.
Yeah.
It is more blessed. It's part of the greatest joys of my life is the things that my wife and I give to. And so if somebody made some offer like that to me, I would see it for what it is. I'd like to think I would, that it's a very nice gesture, and accept it graciously.
Yeah, especially if it's $1 million or something, right?
Why don't you give me that? I'll let you have the blessings.
But so I wanted to bring that up without telling you because, I thought that it would be impactful in connecting to the last episode that we talked about with
entirely
Walensky's book.
What trance comes
let's think about that, right? you're going to focus on stuff. Things will happen that you will focus on. Now, things that capture your attention. And we talk about that in hypnosis all the time, right?
Indeed.
That you focus your attention. Then what happens? You assign meaning. What does meaning really mean? You're going to have emotions about it.
What does meaning really mean?
And what happens when someone is focused on something and then you create an emotion and then you give a suggestion?
Right,
the suggestion results in the action. And in this case, it's all a self-trance.
Sure.
Yeah, exactly. It's this thing that I'm focused on means this, and I'm going to give myself a certain suggestion. I would presuppose that this is the piece Tony Robbins. I'm not saying he's missing it. Like, the guy's a freaking awesome rock star at this stuff. I'm sure he knows this too. I'm just saying he didn't explain it. I imagine there's a missing step here. Focus, meaning, emotion, suggestion to self, action.
Well, it does make sense. Whether you say suggestion to self or direction to self coming out of it.
Exactly.
In which case I do
It's
concur.
implied in what Tony explains, and it's much easier to teach a model as 3 steps, right? So I will, keeping things simply, my word for 2025 is simplify.
Right. And mine is speed up.
Yeah, as you're looking at
8 minutes left.
Look at it. We don't
8 minutes left. We barely
left.
touched this.
What are you talking about?
I just felt like saying it.
Okay, now you're meaning. You see, I assigned unconscious meaning to Mike. Just wants to rush through this second podcast
so make
here.
sure we get everything.
All right, this is hilarious. So that is what I wanted to bring up with respect to the Tony Robbins thing. Go ahead.
Now, talk to me about this competing with yourself. This.
Well, we get there. We'll get there. There's.
I thought it was the next
You're
point.
missing. You're missing part of the notes here.
Oh, there you are. I see your cursor now. Yeah.
No, you don't need to see my cursor.
Oh,
You can just follow the notes in order.
I saw your cursor brought me back. You have to establish meaning here.
So we're going to talk about how can you draw an empowering question from this, right? So what important things, think back to your own life. What important things have happened in your life in the past and that you focused on? And perhaps what meaning did you assign to them? And was that useful? Was that the right choice to assign that particular meaning? And it all happened unconsciously.
That's so interesting because we are attributing meaning to all sorts of different things. And looking back in retrospect, we say hindsight is 20/20. We can look at this as hypnotists, agents of change, and people who just are smart in general out there can look at your life and say, okay, that decision I made there, what was the emotion that drove it? And was it a logical decision based on that emotion? Never mind that. Was it a best decision? Or could I have looked at this in a different way that would have resulted in a different decision?
And would you agree that always this has to be done in retrospect? Now, that doesn't mean it has to be done 10 years later. It could be a moment later. It could be 10 minutes later, an hour later. But it has to be done after, because the first
you have to
meaning,
see the consequences.
The first meaning will be the unconscious meaning. Yeah, and whether you beat yourself to the consequences by changing the meaning rather quickly, or experience the consequences and then reevaluate and go, yeah, that thing that happened when I was in grade 5 where I was really embarrassed because that kid, hit me in the balls with a softball when he hit it off his bat, and I was laughed
Can we say hit?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, he struck me in the testicles, disenfranchised.
Yeah.
Me. Well, everyone laughed at me while I'm making all this up. Didn't happen to me, but imagine that it had. The meaning that you assigned is, oh, you're the laughing stock now. No. Something funny happened and I got over it. Maybe that's a better
even
meaning,
funnier
right?
when I got back at it. Yeah, later.
So I think it's a worthwhile exercise here to reflect on what happened in your life, and did you make the right choice in assigning the meaning? Is it worth reevaluating that meaning right now?
Right. No, since we're playing so loose with the consequences here and the script that you've come up with, which is brilliant, let's just point out, did you ever do this in gym class? Mike Smith told me this, and I do remember it happening in our class. We had those ropes hanging from the ceiling to do the rope climbing, which I was actually pretty good at, because I could do the leg thing really well with it.
Yeah.
And there's a knot on the end.
Oh, and
somebody was swinging at you, and without the Mike, and you turn around, it's swinging, and you put your arm out to block it, and all it does is swings up, hits you in the testicles.
It goes under your arm, whack.
Yeah.
Pendulums, you're right in the nads.
We care enough to warn you.
All right.
Watch it. When they call your name, there's probably a rope coming.
Okay. All right. So then the next part, yes, thank you for bringing my attention to the next part of this, which was the idea of competing with yourself.
Yeah.
So as that discussion went on between Patrick and Tony Robbins, they were talking about all the different, he was working up to, well, how did you get involved in NLP, et cetera? And he worked with Grinder, which is awesome too, right? And
I thought he worked with Richard Bandler.
No, he did most of his work with Grinder. At least he said so in that podcast.
Okay.
But he spent most of his time working with Grinder, who, interestingly, so you remember the story about how he taught I think it was the U.S. Army.
Yeah, the shooting.
It was a 4-day
Marksmanship.
pistol shooting class. And
Yep.
he said on this podcast that the best pass rate they could ever achieve was like 70%. And he gone in and said, look, I'll take the training, cut it in half, and get you double the results. And, he was 30 at the time, or 20 or 20 something. He was very young. Yeah, he was in his 20s. I think he said he's 24, if I remember correctly. And these people who were learning from him are 35-ish, something like that.
Right.
So he admits, I've never shot in my life. How many rounds have you shot? Oh, no, I've never shot. Oh, don't worry, I got this anyway. He was just really cocky, but he knew how to model. And he was supposed to do this with Grinder. And Grinder called him and said, hey, emergency, I got to go to Germany. You're on your own. Click.
Wow.
Imagine
Talk about
that.
being thrown in the deep end.
Anyway, so he did this, and he's working his way up to, so I've done this and I've done that. And eventually, Mother Teresa and all these people. And so he started talking about a time he was having a conversation with Michael Jordan and asking him about basketball and wanting to know about his mindset for modeling. And what he discovered is that Michael Jordan, and this was shared with the older basketball star, Dr. J.
Yeah,
Remember?
sure.
Yeah, that the idea here
Julius
is,
Erving, wasn't it?
yeah, not to compete against others, to compete against yourself. So, and you can think about how this ties into the idea of incrementalism that we talked about. So instead of incrementally, well, who can I beat next? The next contender. Think about incrementally competing with yourself. And I guess that's the way Michael Jordan thought about basketball skills is, how can I just get a little bit better than I currently am now? So instead of putting the pressure on, I have to be better than this person or that person, I just want to be a bit better than myself.
Right.
It's a different attitude, and it seems to be very useful. So I think that's
I just want to be a lot better than you.
Yeah, there you go. I think
He's a bit better than myself.
A lot better than you. Yeah, I think that's
no, that's a it's a really good thing, because then you're not knocked down if someone keeps exceeding what you're doing, because you are your own model for excellence in it. That's great.
Yeah,
I'm going to apply that to piano. I actually am. Now that you've said that.
Exactly. You don't have to freaking compete.
I'm not competing with freaking Olaf. What's his name?
Olaf. What's his name from Norway?
Viking or Olafsson.
Viking or Olafsson.
I don't have to compete with him.
Amazing. Norwegian, right?
Icelandic.
Thank you. Sorry.
The Icelandic.
Sorry, Norway. You guys are awesome too. But
yeah,
in this case, he's Icelandic, which is not Greenlandic.
Well, this has been great.
Yeah, this has been an excellent episode. We're just going to, no, I'm kidding. We're not done yet. We got a couple. Okay, so that's the Tony Robbins stuff. I will say, go watch that podcast episode. I always mixes up the acronym. The Patrick Bet David podcast, PBD, with Tony Robbins. Let us know what you thought about it. Let us know what you got about it.
Yeah, it's
got
good.
from it, and use some of the stuff. I think it's really useful. Tony Robbins is turning 65 very soon.
My F.
Yeah.
Are you serious?
I think he was something like in his 30s when he wrote Unlimited Power.
Well, I got to think about it, because when did I start doing the personal power tapes? They were cassette tapes.
Yeah.
I'd go on my walk and listen to them. So that was before I did my NLP training. I hadn't even heard of NLP at that time. So it's probably about 1990. So that's 35 years ago.
Yeah.
Which means he's
which means he would have been about 30 around the time.
Yeah.
He probably was in his 20s when he published Unlimited Power then. The book.
Packers of hell.
Holy
That's
crap.
amazing.
So it just goes to show you.
Goes to show.
If you do what you love, you'll keep doing it. Never will it feel like work. It's fascinating. I just think the guy's a freaking great guy. I'm so grateful that I got to listen to you do the Brain Software keynote where you got me introduced to his material. And then, of course, Erickson and Bandler and Grinder and all these guys.
Well,
and now we get to
that
do
was
this.
the open door. And remember, too, my friend Ron at the time was listening to Tony Robbins. I said, it doesn't interest me. Sounds like typical stuff.
And he challenged you.
He challenged me. He said,
right?
Mandel, he said, I've never known you to not give something a listen. He said, for you to just delete it without even looking into it. I said, okay, you're right.
I don't give a toss kind of attitude.
Then I got the personal power tapes just to try, and thought, this is mind blowing.
Yeah,
and that was it.
It really is. So we all have things that we can learn from people, even if they're younger.
Yes.
There we go. All right, let's talk about mass hypnosis and the media.
All right.
And we've talked about this in the past. We've talked a lot about mass hypnosis, everything from news stories to
Sporting
how people would get. I think you talked about this, the 1 in 5 rule.
Oh, yeah, Estabrooks.
Estabrooks and
1944, 1945,
lynch
hypnotism.
mobs, and you could be watching and observing. And here, talk about that.
Well, 1 in 5, Estabrooks believed in his book, Hypnotism. He was professor of psychology at Colgate University. He was actually a Canadian. And he believed that 1 person in 5 could be hypersuggestible, despite their beliefs, 20% of people. And he gave the example of someone being drawn into a lynching, even though they were opposed to it. I mean, it's very, very interesting stuff. But mass hypnosis happens all the time. I've said for years, and I lectured NATO forces on this at the military college in Canada, on how everybody can get drawn into these loops without even realizing it. And television is the most ubiquitous trance inducer of all. It's everywhere. And now in its miniature form. So
100%. And you've also talked to like things back in the 1930s when Hitler came into power, and he would give speeches. And I think you mentioned he was in the early days kind of a crap communicator.
I was terrible.
Disappeared, came back onto the scene, and we're in no way.
Came back and he was, we're appalled
just
by
telling
what
you
he
the
did.
facts
We're
here.
talking just for the psychology here. Absolutely. If you watch the video Triumph of the Will, which was really a shot at Martin Luther for talking about the tyranny of the will in his Christian faith. But when you look at Triumph of the Will, which was done by a German filmmaker, I believe she was German, to support the Nazi Party, you can probably see it on YouTube. And it's terrifying because you're looking at an entire group of thousands of people in a powerful hypnotic trance.
Yeah.
And one of the worst things is if you're like my brother-in-law, that wouldn't work on me. Because even though he's never having studied it, even if you know the stuff, it's very hard to resist these techniques. You know, like a
100%.
timer on a website, you've got 8 minutes left. I'm like,
I know it's a marketing technique, but I don't want to miss out. I better buy now.
It still works.
It really does. That's
But
totally true.
These techniques are happening all the time. I'll give you an example from maybe the early 1980s, the Cabbage Patch Doll. Cabbage Patch Doll came out. They were the doll for Christmas. And women were like beating each other up in stores trying to get to these things.
I was in grade school back when that was a craze. And
Probably
there's been other crazes since then. So tons of them. So mass hypnosis. Let's talk about the example that brought this to light.
The high school teacher.
Yeah, the example that we wanted to talk about that was just the most recent example is we were surfing. Do we still say that? I was scrolling through X, which used to be called Twitter, but I'm now getting in the habit of actually calling it X. And calling not tweets, but posts. Anyway, I suppose over the holidays, there was a teacher. He's a young man, Vancouver, British Columbia. His name's Jacob, and he teaches an entrepreneurship class in his high school to grade 9 kids.
Okay.
And he had come back from the holidays, I suppose, and said, I decided I wanted to run some experiments and get my viewership up on X. And so we're going to do a little class assignment here. And he gave you can find his video if you look him up. Maybe we'll put it in the show notes if we can find it. I'm sure I can find it. And Jacob, good on you. Good on you to see you doing interesting experiments with the kids and having them learn stuff on their own and letting them discover what happened. And I hope maybe you'll show them this. It'll be interesting. But he gave his grade 9 kids. You watched the video, right?
Yeah. No, I didn't watch video. You told me about it.
I told you about it. I thought I gave you the link to X. Anyway, so I'll talk about it then. I just thought I was doing too much of it. I thought I was doing too much of the talking.
No, this is fabulous. You're doing a great job. You're enjoying yourself. So
he was teaching his kids about social media and X, because let's face it, most grade 9 kids don't use X, aka Twitter. They probably use things like Instagram and TikTok and Snapchat and whatever. So he was just explaining what goes on, and he gave them the challenge to write a post for X that what he would do is he was recording himself as he was explaining this. So he had his camera recording him, and he's saying, okay, kids, so what we're doing is I've decided the following. Here's the assignment. You're going to create a post, and then I'm going to post it under my post as a comment, and I'll put your first name, and I'll put your response to the assignment question, which I'm getting to in a second, and the one who gets the most likes wins. And what's the prize? It's a higher grade in the class, everybody. And of course the kids, there's a prize to compete for, right? Which is great. It's great to see kids caring about their grades. The assignment was to go for 30 minutes and research Elon Musk and Tesla, and then to write a post about Elon Musk and Tesla. Now, he gave them the assignment on camera, and we watched the video. So there was no bias here. Okay. He didn't say, I'm a huge Tesla fan. Elon Musk is amazing. Or the contrary to that. Elon Musk is a moron and he's just harming the environment, and he's unnecessarily getting himself involved in politics, and what a dick.
Yeah.
He didn't do anything. He kept it.
What else didn't he do?
Yeah. So these kids went off, and I think he told them they could use ChatGPT. They could do a bunch of stuff. They weren't able to use X itself.
Okay.
Because it was banned at the school, but they all went to Google. So he said they just all went to Google, and they spent 30 minutes just Google searching Tesla and Elon Musk. Now, here was the interesting thing. Every single post, I think without exception, was overwhelmingly negative.
And this is the whole class.
Yeah, like every
class of
kid,
25,
I don't know how
30
many
kids,
because I didn't count them, but it was a bunch, a bunch of different kids, and all of these, they're grade 9 level writing, so it's not masterpieces or whatever, but who cares about the writing quality? It was about the thought process, right? And it was Tesla, bad company, bad for environment, Elon Musk, bad man, bad products, bad stock performance, just bad, right?
And that was it. That was the conclusion.
That was the gist of it. Every single kid came back after 30 minutes of Google searching, Elon bad, Tesla bad. Now, whatever you think, there's a balance. Now, when you do a Google search, you're going to come up with, again, it's going to be dependent upon what's going on in the news in the moment.
Absolutely.
And it just so happens that at this point in time, the stock had a meteoric rise, and then over the last 2 or 3 weeks, it's come down substantially. So if you were focusing on that, and we talked about that just a moment ago, didn't we? What meaning do you assign?
What's the emotion that comes out of that?
Oh, bad. Anyway, the headlines have all been largely negative. If you were to go to Google,
right,
you'd get a bunch of negative headlines. Now, what we would expect adults to do, which even they don't do, is what? Critical thinking.
Right, which means you have to have a belief challenging question.
Mm-hmm.
And our Jedi questions we use all the time is, how did you come to believe that? And how do you know it's true? Asking them for their evidence criteria, because we've discovered over the years that if you bang heads with, well, you're wrong. I do the one my wife's family would typically, you think that. Nobody's listening. Nobody's freaking listening. But if you ask questions, then the person is guided to go inside and produce the evidence. Remember, whoever makes an assertion is the one who must defend it. If I claim that the moon is made of green cheese and tell Chris this, he doesn't have to prove it isn't.
No,
I have to prove it is.
Yeah.
I'm making the assertion.
Well, why don't you fly to the moon and prove me wrong? It's not going to work.
So we have to ask these questions to challenge these bizarre statements or any kind of statement, because these beliefs are based often on emotion and nothing more than that. So I think it's remarkable to me how just the filters of Google and wherever else they look, ChatGPT, cause this universal dislike for Musk and Tesla. I think that's incredible.
And whether it be dislike or love of, it doesn't matter. And the same thing would have been true in the recent U.S. election, or the fact that our prime minister has just resigned here or will resign or whatever. Like, there's all these news stories, right? And whatever the drumbeat is of the media, that works its way into belief systems.
Right.
When the message is repeated.
Repetition is not only the mother of skill, but repetition is the mother of indoctrination.
Belief,
indoctrination. I'm sure Keir Starmer must have been in that class, because he doesn't like Musk too much right now.
Yeah, because he's been going after him. Yeah. And that's
a horse of a different color.
Yes, we're not even going to get into it.
Well,
but
we just did.
The bottom line here is that the repeated messaging is from the media is that induction. It's a slow over time. In this case, it happened to these high school kids in like 30 minutes. They were hypnotically induced to go.
Well, it might not even
happen. Bad man.
It might not even happen in 30 minutes. It might happen in the first 5. They spent 25 minutes writing about it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's much more likely.
Insane.
Because they had 30 minutes to do the assignment, which implies, let's say 15 minutes of Google searching. You probably already made up your mind in the first few minutes. Because think about it. Not to blame the kids, of course. They're under pressure to do an assignment.
Sure.
Do you think they're in critical thinking mode? No, they're in get information, form conclusion,
write about it.
Done.
Yeah.
So it's actually a sense of hypnosis here, because selective thinking is now. The thinking is not analyze this and be critical. It is get the assignment done, right? So whatever information is in Google, shoom, right past the critical faculty, bam, we got hypnosis.
It's a good point, Chris. A very good one.
That was what we wanted to mention, is just to talk about this. And I think it's a good I'm so glad you actually brought up the belief challenging questions because they're in my notes here. There you go.
Oh, there you go.
Fit perfectly.
Bravo.
How did you come to believe that? And how do you know it's true? Just because someone told you doesn't necessarily make it so. And critical thinking is a really good skill. And finally, so kudos.
It's a crucial skill.
Kudos to the high school teacher, Jacob, out in Vancouver for giving his students an interesting project and then evaluating it and conversing with people on X about how it went and
Brilliant.
how surprising it was, because I don't think he was necessarily expecting that outcome. It was kind of interesting. I think it's time to take a commercial break, Mike.
Okay,
so
if we must.
Let me now bring to you a welcome, a special report from Hypno North, Mayford, Ontario.
Yeah, how are you tonight? Thanks once again. It's your old pal Brado here with a bit of interesting news. There's a new radio station opening up here in the land of nobody gives a rip. Its call sign is CKFU 1030 AM. It was built by Billy Dials, the third stupidest person up here, and I don't need to tell you who number 1 and 2 are. Apparently, the Red Rooster wasn't repairable, whatever, once I drove my Dodge Ram through the wall into the kitchen. So Billy took the insurance money, had a radio station built over the front of the diner, which still had some foundational walls in place, and then he cleared out the back of the kitchen and bricked it up so it won't get condemned. Anyway, he called the radio station Radio Corn Cob because he thought it sounded cool. And once he got his license for the station, he built a tobacconist shop in the part of the diner that's still intact so he can sell pipes and tobacco. Well, naturally, Eddard and Duder got involved. We're all over this and showed up with a couple of cheap corncob pipes and bought about a pound of tobacco each because Billy Dials got a whack of insurance money on the demolished kitchen, was actually paying these tools to smoke. Now, I'm sure you're wondering where the hell this is all going, and it's as dickish as one might expect. The idea is the radio station would never play music at all, but would feature Eddard and Duder sitting around talking about smoking and pipes and cigars and that. And so I thought the radio cancer might be a more appropriate name for it. So the day they went on the air, the announcer, who happened to be a dick named Eddard, and his sidekick Duder, started talking about pipes and that, and the two of them lit these enormous calabash pipes like Sherlock effing Holmes, and just talked about smoking for 6 frickin' hours until they both turned green and Dials had to take them off the air due to the lack of oxygen and the vomiting and that. So now they're addicted to nicotine and have pleaded with me to use my hypnotic powers to help them. And I said I would, but I was naturally lying because of them being dicks and morons and that. And I took the fee they gave me in advance and used the $200 to buy them more tobacco, which they're smoking right now as I tell you this, but they're doing it in Eddard's garage because the district health officer said the ex-diner radio station is a danger to human and animal life because of the smoke and the fire hazard and that. So Radio Cornhole is officially off the air, and that's the pathetic state of hypnosis up here in Grey County. And this has been your old pal Brado signing off and saying thanks again and good night.
And we are back. I always love Brado's updates. Let's talk about, we got 2 things to wrap up with, and then you and I, we're going to lunch.
All right.
So these are quicker, these are fun, and they're useful. So power topics. Here we go. In fact, one is called the power of
the 5-second pause. Man, this is such a useful thing. I read about this a couple of weeks ago. I get Apple News, a paid version, because I like to scour the news for world changes and especially things that we can bring into the podcast. And this was an interesting thing. I might have saved the article, but the gist of it is this. I think it was done in Scotland. I might be wrong. The location doesn't matter. But the idea was this. If you're in a discussion with someone, you know, we've said before that once the adrenaline starts and people's buttons start getting pushed, they get really pissed off with each other. Before long, the discussion goes off the rails and people are screaming at each other, not talking to each other, and so on. It said what you do is in a discussion, when the other person makes a point, take 5 seconds to pause, 5 seconds. And I like the old film development trick, Kodak 1, Kodak 2, Kodak 3, Kodak 4, Kodak 5. You do it inside your head, though. Then you answer the person. Guess what happens? They've determined that this stops the adrenaline dump in your system. You are not reacting now, but you're thinking rationally. And I have used this with people since, one in particular, I won't say who it is, but I'm married to her. And amazingly, we're able to even calm down disagreements about stuff. We've been married for over 40 years. There's just disagreements about things. And things have taken a really interesting, logical, and rational turn in some things that could have become a bit annoying or something off the rails a bit. Well, full-out arguments in the past. And the study that was done probably a university. They said it made no difference if the length of time was beyond 5 seconds. 5 seemed to be the magic number. 10 seconds and 15 seconds did no better result. In fact, I could see that would be counterproductive because the person might think that you're sitting there not answering and being, passive aggressive or something. Just give this a shot. The next time you're in a discussion and there's a chance of it becoming heated, just pause.
It's just 5 seconds.
5 seconds before you respond. That's the only thing you have to do. There's no other rules. And amazingly, even things that start to go off the rails, calm down, and you will thank me just as I am thanking me.
Now, while we're on this, just before we move on,
I like it. Now.
Yeah, now, before we move to the next little power technique we're going to give you, what do you think would be the outcome of somebody doing this in a really fun situation? Like, when we're excited, just as we typically get all happy and having fun and interrupt each other all the time on podcasts, or if you're hanging out with a bunch of guys and you're just joking around like we would do at HypnoThoughts Live, for example, in Las Vegas, you're having a great time. If you were to pause before continuing the fun, good time, that would kill it, wouldn't it?
I was going to say that.
Yeah. So it's the same thing. If you can imagine that, then guess what? Would you want to kill that? No, of course not. But would you want to kill something from going off the rails?
Right. And it just seems to calm everything down.
Yeah.
Not only keep it calm, but calm it down.
Calm it when you need it to get calm.
The difference is you're acting instead of reacting. And that's the power of it.
That is it. The 5 seconds stops you from being in that hyper reactive.
Yeah, just going, you bastard.
Yeah. So there we go. So that power of the 5 second pause. Okay, the next one, I'll let you introduce this one because we've been talking about this for a while.
Stop doing it now. This is interesting. This is whenever you have to confront someone about a mistake they've made in the workplace or whatever, you stay away from you. You did, and you made this, and this has cost us money because no, that's terribly confrontational. That can make people feel very upset. It can make them feel like failures. It can make them unhappy. It can make them angry. And the key is you move alongside them psychologically and you use we instead.
Right. So you could say, if somebody constantly is showing up late for work, I think we had this as an example we were talking about recently, right? If somebody's showing up for work late, you don't want to sit there and stand in front of them and I noticed that you were late a lot.
Right. Instead, it's something along the lines of, I think we really all need to make a point of being on time because as we work together, that's
value.
It's now spread. Mm-hmm. It has divided the responsibility with a metaphorical we instead of nailing it as one person's failure.
Right.
Moving alongside them using we instead of I.
You can start as we and then shift to you when you ask for the commitment. Like, we really value working as a team, and I think it's important if we all commit to showing up on time. Is that something you can commit to?
Or even
that would be
even softer. Mm-hmm. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, how do you feel? Yeah, exactly. How do you feel? Yeah, I like
or
that.
How does
better
that sound? No, you're not even saying you.
Criticism is now replaced with a we value this, and it's important for it's important that we X or Y.
Oh, totally.
Then how do you feel about that? It's just a question now.
That's right.
Right?
The interesting thing is, as an NLP trainer, when I get criticism, I just dissociate from it and immediately treat it as data, as information, so I can respond unemotionally. I'm not 100%, perfect at this. I'm about 99% though. So this is even beyond that. This to me is amazing because it causes a psychological alliance that you're working with the person. You're not accusing them. You're not being accusatory.
They're included in the we, by the way.
Right.
That's a distinction. It would work exactly the opposite of this if they were excluded from the we, and now it's us against you,
which
right?
is terrible.
We've been talking about you.
Oh,
that's not what we mean.
Nobody wants to be outside the tribe. It's human nature. And this keeps the person in the tribe instead of spotlighting them for making horrendous
So we'll
mistakes.
call that the inclusive we, or something like that. It's. I don't even have a name for it. That sucks.
Yeah, it does. We'll edit that out.
In that case, that's probably a good time to edit that out and
let's do that.
This podcast. No, I'm kidding. We're not editing anything out, but we will end the podcast.
We do like saying that, though.
We will wrap up here. And
what about the empowering question?
We'll go to the empowering question and then a little hypnotic benediction, and then we'll say goodnight. All right. So, considering the immense power and meaning and the hypnotic influence of the media, and given that you have the capacity to redefine the narratives of your life, what significant events in your past require a re-evaluation of the meanings that you assign to them? And what more empowering meanings can you choose to adopt starting now.
And by looking at this and thinking in terms of the components of your own understandings of changing communication, changing people's lives, and bringing your own life to the foreground in a way that is glanative, somewhat perfect, and much more enjoyable, you can enjoy the rest of your week. That's right.
All right, so make sure you head on over to MikeMandelHypnosis.com. If you're interested in this kind of stuff, but you don't want formal hypnosis training, let me strongly recommend the Brain Software Syndicate, MikeMandelHypnosis.com/BSS. It's BS with an extra S. And if you're interested, of course, in our hypnosis training, it's MikeMandelHypnosis.com, and you'll see a link right there to sign up and get started for free with a test drive to our online academy. And of course, you can come hang out with us in Toronto. Keep listening to our podcast. Leave us some comments. Show us some love on YouTube. Subscribe to our channel. It'll be awesome. And we'll see you in the next episode. Thanks once again. And good night.